in corruption. The business of corruption is like any other.
10 reasons why China is more of a threat than Russia ever was. Number 1. The Belt and Road Initiative. A global development strategy adopted by the Chinese government. It involves infrastructure development and investments in nearly 70 countries and international organizations. It is considered a centerpiece of Xiaoping's foreign policy. Some see it as a plan for Chinese world domination, for a China-centered global trading network. The project has a targeted completion date of 2049. This coincides with the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. Sounds like something out of a Bond movie to me, though.
I am a proud member of the Communist Party. The party is more important than the individual.
Number 2. Unrestricted Warfare. A book on military strategy from 1999 by 2 colonels in the People's Liberation Army. It lays out how a nation can defeat a technologically superior opponent through a variety of unconventional means. Rather than focusing on direct military confrontation, it examines other means such as international law and economics to place your opponent in a bad position. It argues the primary weakness of America in military matters is that it only believes in military evolution through advances in technology. It also argues that the US military doctrines evolve because new technology allows new capabilities. As such, America does not consider the wider picture of military strategy. But I'm sure this is all theoretical, though. Number 3. Culture warfare. The CCP has a set of regulations for film, and if Hollywood does not comply with these, the film will not be released in China. China also exerts control over the content by financial backing of Hollywood films. A few examples of entertainers who have not complied are Brad Pitt, Katy Perry, PewDiePie, Martin Scorsese, and Winnie the Pooh because he looks like Xiaoping. Other recent examples of China's influence in Hollywood films are the removal of the Taiwan flag from the new Top Gun movie and a black character reduced in promotion materials for the Star Wars film in China.
Are you prisoners here?
Some people said Pooh looked like the Chinese president, so we're illegal in China now.
Jesus, what kind of madhouse is this?
Russia could never dream of co-opting American sport the way China has with the NBA. Basketball coach Daryl Morey is banned from China after posting a Fight for Freedom, Stand with Hong Kong tweet. The NBA had 12 of its 25 sponsorship deals with Chinese companies cancelled or suspended in the wake of Morey's tweet. The NBA did not back the coach but forced him to apologise. After the loss of revenue, the NBA's biggest star, LeBron James, tweeted, "I believe Daryl wasn't educated on the situation at hand when he spoke. Yes, we all have freedom of speech, but at times there are ramifications for the negative that can happen when you're not thinking about others and only thinking about yourself."
Yeah! I want to be proud of who we are, guys. And anybody who would betray their ideals just to make money in China isn't worth a lick of spit.
Because Russia was perceived as a predominantly white country, the race issue was never a factor in the Cold War. But China is well aware of America's obsession with race. Any criticism of China can be spun into racism.
Dougal, look.
I am Chinese, if you please. Come on, Dougal, lighten up.
Number 4. Biological warfare. Did the CCP weaponize the virus by closing down flights within China whilst allowing them internationally, or was it total incompetence? 10,000 Chinese nationals and foreigners living in China flew every day on direct flights into the United States at the beginning of the pandemic. The result was thousands of unknowing carriers spread the disease around the world while the government covered up its epidemic. As far as Chinese exports go, this wasn't their best.
I want to say to people, come to Chinatown. Here we are. We're, again, careful, safe, and come join us.
Number 5. Re-education. China is using many methods to infiltrate the West. In Western universities, the Chinese have used the Confucius Institutes and Thousand Talents programs to push propaganda, steal IP, steal American research through espionage using, amongst other things, gifts and donations. There are also more and more cases of university professors illegally working or even spying for China, including schools such as Harvard. Number 6. Technological warfare. TikTok and spying apps are evidence of China spying through tech. Huawei and 5G networks are being forced on countries. China sees it as a cornerstone of their technological takeover. The British government recently indicated it was having second thoughts about Huawei. China's response? Britain will bear the consequences if it does not stick with the agreement. Not exactly customer service as we're used to in the West. Compare the freedom that was given to Chinese companies and the censorship that the US tech giants like Facebook and Google were happy to go along with in China. China got rich by warping trade and stealing technology in much the same way it deals with epidemics and dissent. That is, by simply ignoring legitimate criticism and crushing anyone in its way. One espionage case is opened nearly every 10 hours in the US against China. Now compare this to how China was treated during the First Cold War. Russians were once banned from a third of America. Number 7. Oppression.
We need independence.
Yep. And what's your message to? Have you seen Donald Trump? Do you think he should step in?
Donald Trump don't trust China. China is asshole.
How does China treat its own citizens? Political and religious oppression of 1 million Uyghur Muslims, oppression of Buddhists in Tibet, including the burning down of temples, organ harvesting, including those of political prisoners, forced abortions due to the one-child policy, the crackdown on the Hong Kong democracy protesters, and journalists and doctors mysteriously disappearing during the outbreak of the virus in Wuhan. How does it treat non-citizens? There are examples that China prefers subjugation when working with other countries. There are punishments, mainly economic, when, for example, countries have questioned the origins of the coronavirus. We can see this with its punishment of Australia through trade, after it questioned the corona origins. Recently, the last 2 reporters working in China for Australian media were flown home after a 5-day diplomatic standoff. Now remember, the student-led demonstrations in Tiananmen Square, the death toll varies from several hundred to several thousand. This is still the same regime that caused the deaths of some 60 million citizens under Mao Zedong. Stalin, in comparison, only murdered 20 million under Soviet communist rule. The government is beginning to roll out its social credit system, which is designed to raise awareness of integrity and the level of trustworthiness in Chinese society. It will focus on 4 aspects of behavior, including honesty in government affairs, commercial integrity, societal integrity, and judicial credibility. Technology can be used to assess how good a citizen is, but if your credit social score gets too low, you could find yourself barred from any activities. Now this isn't the least bit scary. Number 8. Casualties of war. In the Korean War, American and Chinese soldiers came up against each other. More than 40,000 Americans lost their lives. We do not know how many of them were caused by Chinese troops, but at least 180,000 Chinese soldiers died. An armistice was declared in 1953, meaning the war never ended. Let's take fentanyl as an example. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, 50 times more potent than heroin. The number of deaths in the US involving synthetic opioids has increased dramatically ever since 2013, and in 2018 there were more than 31,000 deaths. A congressional commission has referred to China as the largest source of illicit fentanyl and fentanyl-like substances in the US. According to US law enforcement and drug investigators, China is the main supplier of the drug to the US. And this is why we take the drug problem very seriously.
I made bad choices. I got high.
Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like
and I inhale. I did inhale.
Okay.
Number 9. Economic warfare. Chinese companies listed on the US stock exchange have a combined market value of over $500 billion, and they don't have to comply with financial regulations, and China restricts audits of its companies. The CCP has control over all Chinese firms, which means they have no profit motive. It's just a tool for the regime. How can this be called free trade? Now, Russia has a much smaller population than both China and the US, and when we look at GDP, Russia is considerably weaker, having an economy that is smaller than, for example, Brazil, Italy and France. Now, it seems almost impossible to decouple from China with so many industries having production in China, but even more worrying are the political entanglements. It's hard to find a politician who isn't connected somehow to China. Take Hunter Biden, the son of the Democratic presidential candidate, who has received money from the Chinese government and has a 10% stake in a Chinese firm. 10 days after Joe Biden's first trip to China as vice president, the company that his son Hunter Biden worked for gets a $1 billion deal from the Chinese government. Hunter had no experience in private equity or Chinese relations. So why was he hired? This could be seen as a conflict of interest, especially as many were critical of how soft Biden was on China after the deal.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the west. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system. I mean, they're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not competition for us.
Number 10, conventional warfare. The US has the third largest army in the world and is considered the best trained and most powerfully equipped. It has by far the most aircraft, biggest advancements in technology like the Navy's new railgun, and the largest nuclear arsenal. The US has the largest military budget, which is far more significant than its closest rivals. Actually, it's larger than the budgets of the next 9 countries combined. China is the country with the largest standing army and is also the best trained, one of the best trained. It has upped its military budget by more than 10% a year over the last 5 years. In comparison, the Russian military budget has been cut over the last 5 years and has only the 5th largest army behind India and North Korea. China's army is well trained, well equipped and considered to be one of the strongest in the world, although its equipment is considered to be behind the US by about 20 years. The strategic importance of the South China Sea cannot be overstated. A third of the world's shipping passes through it. Its fisheries are critical sources of food for millions of people, and its seabed covers vast reserves of oil and gas. China's continued claim to the South China Sea is destabilizing to international rule of law. There is also a conflict on the southern border. Chinese military in June of 2020 beat to death 20 Indian soldiers, and in September shots were fired on the unofficial border for the first time in decades. Chinese and Indian officials accused each other as soldiers of firing warning shots. So what does this all mean? China was supposed to westernize. Instead, the West seems to become more socialist. It's hard to believe that the head of the CIA under Obama had admitted to voting for the Communist Party, and more politicians in the US consider themselves socialist. The West overlooked systematic Chinese trade surpluses, flagrant violations of world commercial norms, neo-colonial provocations throughout Asia, stealing US patents and copyrights, product dumping, currency manipulation, and technical appropriation. China also controls the production of essential medicines, including the outsourcing of the vast majority of their chemotherapy drugs, antibiotics, heart medicine production. Until recently, talk was not of stopping China's ascendance, but of managing America and the West's relative decline.
You don't have to worry about whether it neatly fits into socialist theory or capitalist theory. You should just decide what works.
But the Chinese, what they said is China would prefer Joe Biden. Whether they do, that's their conclusion, that they would prefer Joe Biden.